Okay, there were a couple things I wanted to add onto my video, of course, because I always do that, right? I finished this, and this is the bamboo and silk from KnitPicks. This is basically, I'll call it a seam, but that's the rounds where you change your pattern. And you can see that it, just by me putting it on one time, it already widened and shortened this way. So the final size is 22 around, and it's about 9.5 deep. And you'll also notice that this bottom edge is a little bit looser than I wanted, but it's only because when I added my cap, I added a 17 on a 15. I only went up one size. You can see there's some fuzzies. I only went up one size rather than two. I think the going up two sizes works better, but I couldn't go any lower than a 15, and I had to use the 17 because this was so fine. This has a wonderful drape, but I still wouldn't risk making a whole big scarf out of it. You could try it. The other thing I wanted to make clear, by the way, I didn't not block those other scarves simply because I was lazy. That's only like 90% of it. The other percentage is, in order for something to block successfully, it has to be all wool. Some people say you can try to block acrylic and you steam or heat, but acrylic melts. And if you're not careful, you've ruined it. So my feeling is, if your yarn has any acrylic in it whatsoever, don't attempt to block it. And all the yarns that I tried did have acrylic. So that's the other reason I didn't try to block it. So that scarf might work out in a long version if you had 100% wool. I want to show you one more thing. Well, a couple more things. When you end this, it'll look just like all the scarves we did. And that'll be offset, and you need to fix that. And you're going to take your tail. This is the end where I cast off. And I'm going to show you the cast off because there's a couple tricks to the cast off that I think are important. So put the tail through your, yarn needle. And you want to go where the V's are here, not here. So you can see this line of V's, and you want to go from front to back underneath that V. And you want to go under both sides of it. Make sure you're not splitting the ply. Make sure you're going under both legs of the stitch. And bring the yarn through. Now, go back down through the middle between the last stitch you knit. And that will be this one, right before the little knot there. And when you pull up on this and weave it in, let me turn it around, I think it'll be easier to see. Once you've pulled up on that and weave it in, it will join it up, and you won't notice that. So let me show you what you do again on the last two rows, because I actually made a mistake in my video. So that's that for that. Oh, and I used, those were 87-yard skeins on this white scarf. So I used 1 1/4 skein. I'll put my yardage down because they were short, 87-yard skeins. Okay, now, so here we are, and I made a mistake on that white scarf because I didn't have you do that one last stitch. So here we are. We're going to pretend that we're ready to cast off now. So this whole row that I'm working on, you can see, has the angle back. That's the knit two together, so we have one more to do. And knit two together, pipe the stitch, move your stitch marker. This is where I made a mistake in my last video at the very end. You need to do one more of those, but this is this row we're going to decrease our size. So before you make that stitch, I want you to pull off your cap and remove your rubber band. Whoops. And remove your rubber band. Put this guy back on. And do one more of the knit two together. And now do one more row of your, and again, this is the last stitch you took off. Now you're just going to put that on your finger, and you're going to do one more row now on this smaller size of tubing with knit two together through the back. Now, if you need to stop your scarf sooner, if you've run out of yarn or if it's already long enough, don't worry if you reverse these last two rows. You can cast off in this pattern, in the knit two together through the back, and it's It's not obvious. I don't see any real difference. I did it that way on one of those scarves. I don't remember which one. And I didn't see any noticeable difference. So don't worry about it if you need to or want to end it sooner. Many of these skeins of yarn, art yarns and things like that, are pretty short. They're less than 90 yards. And 90 is the bare minimum, the Malabrigo. But you could make that Malabrigo a little shorter, I think. I made it 10 inches. So you're going to go all the way around. Like I say, this will help tighten up the bottom. Just like on the rug, one end of it spewed out more than the other, if you remember. And that's what we're compensating for when we do this. And you will be glad you did. It'll look much better. You can see on these bigger, even this just one size up, this 17 makes all the difference in the world. You can actually get your finger in there. I can't recommend this on the 15s. It's just too hard. And if it's not fun, why bother? That's what I say. You might as well use knitting needles. Although this pattern is very difficult. I could not accomplish it on knitting needles. I'll admit that. But you have seen my knitting skills, so that shouldn't be a surprise. Now, here's the last one. Now, go ahead and bring this over. This is the last stitch, but this is our row we're going to cast off. And you're going to cast off, in this case, and knit 2 together through the front, dropping only the first one off. You want to cast off in pattern. So here you are. Well, really, this last one could be one more of these. But, you know, I did it both ways, and it didn't really matter. So knit one more through the back, and then go ahead and switch to your knit 2 through the front, if you will. Okay, so now you have 2 stitches on. And go ahead and cast off that stitch. Now, you have a stitch you've cast off and 2 stitches on. Take and go through the top stitch, knit 2 together. Now you have 2 on above your stitch marker, cast 1 off. You want to be very careful as you're casting off not to grab the wrong stitch. So, and I'm casting off fairly tight. You might want to cast off a little bit looser, but it won't matter too much. Remember, this herringbone is very tight. One of the reasons we're using a smaller hoop as we cast off and cast on is so it helps to tighten up that edge. So here's the cast off stitch. Here's the 2 stitches you've been knitting. You knit together. Make sure you're not grabbing this one, the cast off stitch. Make sure that you're going underneath the stitch you took off last. And again, cast off. And okay, stitch. And bind off. Keep working your stitches around. Make sure you're taking the correct stitch, not the cast off stitch. And you knit it with the next one. And bind that one off. I'm going to take you all the way around because there's a little thing at the end you can't forget. Bind that off. My dog's standing there. Is she in the picture? Really? Okay, we got a few more. We're going to just keep taking you around here. I can't make these hoops much smaller, or you wouldn't be able to see them at all, so you have to bear with me while we get to the end. Each time you want to bind off and make sure that that bind off stitch is not the one you pick up. And I'm making these a little tight. You wouldn't want to do this on a regular scarf. On this one you can get away with it because of the nature of the herringbone. Now once this scarf gets big and heavy, obviously I really wouldn't be binding this off. Oops, my yarn's tangled up here. You know, it can almost sit on top of your, rather than between your legs. When it's lightweight like this and it doesn't have enough yarn on it yet, and then as it gets bigger and heavier, your little mat will basically be a hammock for your knitting, and it will help support it in your lap. You won't have to hold it between your knees anymore. That white scarf was quite heavy. I wouldn't try to do that as a long scarf. I'm sure it would distort the herringbone. Now, this is your last stitch, sort of. But remember, you really have 2 stitches around here. One has only been knit once. So even though the rest of your hoop is empty, you have to knit this last one more time, if you get my drift. And all you're going to do is poke it up through your working yarn and pipe it and take it off. Then here's your stitch, or your last stitch, and I would do this. Cut your yarn. Probably want to leave a longer one than I did right there, and pull this through that last stitch. And now it's going to look like this. And again, you're going to take your needle that I've lost. Oh, here it is. And leave yourself a much longer tail than this. And you're going to go back to your first V. It's more obvious here. And bring it under both legs. And you're going to do the same thing at the top, by the way. And that's going to even that up. So don't worry about that. Go from the front to the back. And then come back to your first V. Make sure you're going through the V. Sometimes it's hard to tell. Even sitting here right now, I'm thinking, do I go there? If you see what I mean. You have this as your last stitch. So pull it out a little bit. And then you can see where you're supposed to be. I like to turn it around so I can see what I'm doing. And here's what I would do. If you don't think that looks right, and I don't think it does, try the second. In other words, back up to this V here and go right through the middle. And then see what happens when you pull it up. Once you've woven that in. So that was the right place the second time. Notice that? It wasn't right the first time, but I got it the second time. So you just try it and see, and don't weave it in until you're sure that you think that's what looks right. And I think that does. And now when you weave this in, it's easier if you turn it inside out. And because this is so much tighter than all the other things we've knit, you literally can weave this in without, make sure you're going the right way. So here's my yarn coming. Now, see these bars here? If I were you, the place I would take this yarn now to weave it in. So in the past, I've always said you better knot it because it's going to come out. But this is a much tighter weave. Now, take this in and go in several stitches. And this is wool, and it should pretty much stay. Now, I've gone that far. Now, skip this stitch and come back and through the same places you already went. And that will help hold it in. Should have left myself some longer. If you get my meaning, and you want to go back underneath all these stitches that you just did. You could go farther than that if you want to. And once I could have pulled that up a little bit tighter. But the point being is, once you do that, and clip it, now you've got something that doesn't really show. Could have done a better job and put that up a little nicer, but you get the idea. And then you don't have to knot it. In something that's this dense, it won't pull out. And you want to just go back up here now and do just what you did down here. And you can see that that is really pretty much invisible. And that's how you do a herringbone cowl. I think I remembered everything this time. Happy knitting!